CEO puts a mandate in saying, hey, we need to use AI, and we're going to start actually analyzing your comp package based on how much AI you're using and how much you're reducing headcount as a result of like following the other CEOs, because a lot of CEOs just follow other CEOs, you're going to get just bad outcomes. All right, Harry, we're back. This is the Future Proof podcast team, and we are recording on a May 26th on a Tuesday. We kind of
day after Memorial Day.
We blew off the weekend. Lots of sports playing, right? Harry, you did golf and padel, and I played pickleball all weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it was not great weather here. I'm sure it was great there, but we still managed to get out and get some stuff in. I decided to go with the all green motif today: green background, green shirt, green trees.
Totally. It looks wintry. It looks wintry for you. But
I think it's just the sun reflecting off the back windows here. It looks like snow almost, but it's actually beautiful blue skies and sun here. So
that's great.
Really nice day. Yeah,
we'll get you out there on the courts or the green, whatever comes fastest.
Yeah, hope so.
Los Angeles has kind of got that June gloom thing that I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it stays gloomy, but it also stays cooler. But that said, kind of like kicking us off, I think that I've done a lot of reading this week and obviously been, as you as well, analyzing the AI space and the business space. And I guess like the college graduations bringing up, AI and job creation, job destruction to a fever pitch. And I figured we could just spend this whole podcast talking about that. And I'll kick us off there, that there's just two, like the way I'm looking at it, and this is up for debate here, but there's two camps. AI is going to destroy jobs, and the layoffs that we're seeing are as a result of that. And we talked about that in previous newsletters that you'd written about Jack Dorsey's staff reduction. Or there's another group that's saying, no, it's going to create jobs faster than it's going to destroy. And it's a bit of the optimist, which I think Mark Andreessen sort of kind of holds that.
He is paid to be an optimist, yes, but
he's paid to be an optimist, yeah. But he's sort of vociferous about that. So why don't we just jump in and start talking? Is that do you see those two camps brewing?
And look, I think two things can be true at the same time. And look, I'm old enough that I graduated college last century. It was 1988. I got out of school, and I remember distinctly Black Monday. Like October, I think it was 25th or October 17th, one of the two, of 1987. And the stock market dropped 25% in one day. And I'd worked on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange that summer. And I sort of looked at that, and I wanted to get a job on Wall Street. And I watched the TV, and I saw the carnage. And I said, I'm never getting a job. Like it's over.
Yeah. It's over. Yeah.
And I can see where students right now are coming out of college and looking at entry-level positions that are being cut back and saying, I'm screwed. I'm never getting a job. And even worse, I have $300,000 in debt and a philosophy degree. No offense to the philosophers, or maybe some offense to the philosophers, but I mean, it's interesting stuff, but it's not necessarily practical on a day-to-day basis. So, you look at that and you say, you need to be a pretty high agency person to go get a job as a college undergrad. I saw it with my own two daughters. Both of them graduated in the last bunch of years, and one of whom, my older one had a degree in mechanical engineering, got a master's in mechanical engineering and aerospace engineering, and had like 10 companies actually looking for her. And she had like 9 offers. Took one, is super happy, working away. The other one was a dance major.
which is essentially a philosophy major,
which is maybe worse. She's in better shape than the philosophers, and she didn't want to dance. She wanted to go get into interior design. But my daughter Fiona is an incredible high agency person, and so she came up with a plan which I tweaked with her, and We had a very definitive plan to get her a job, and she did it. And, it wasn't, "Hey, dad got you a job," because of some connection. She got a job with someone she cold called. And, after having set up, design Instagrams and retweeting retweeting, reposting their stuff and commenting on their stuff along with, hundreds of others, which she liked, and then narrowing it down and then interviewing again and then offering to do free work. And, it was a real saga, in order to get there, but she got there. And now she's ensconced in the industry, and she's, moved on to the next job and is doing great and is loving life. And so, it's sort of like, if you think that the old way of doing things is the way it's going to be, it's not. So will AI create more jobs than it destroys? Maybe. Don't know. But will it destroy more jobs than it creates to start? Yes, I think yes, for sure. And then there's a timing mismatch there, which, then makes people boo at commencement speeches.
Yeah. So exactly. So like, if you put yourself back in your 88-year self, it's like, AI is getting sort of boos at the commencement speeches. And I think some of the people that are giving those speeches are so tone deaf. Do you know what I mean? I think
100%.
You know what I mean? I think that, you're having I don't know, the ex-CEO Eric Schmidt at this conference, or I think the other one that was of note was the fellow that runs a really big music agency or publishing company in Tennessee, and he got boos.
Yeah.
And he was just blunt. He was just like, deal with it, right? But I think the student body that are graduating, are feeling sort of negative about it. And
at the same time, they spent 4 years using ChatGPT to do their homework.
Yeah, because they get it. They get that it's
Yeah, I mean, it's Scott Borchetta, right, from Big Machine, I guess. It was very involved with. He ultimately sold Taylor Swift's catalog, right, to Scooter Braun, and then and moved on from there. Yeah, it's like, and Steve Wozniak came out and said, you have actual intelligence. I mean, Wozniak did have actual intelligence. He partnered with Steve Jobs. It was an highly intelligent move on his part.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is, I think Steve Wozniak is clearly sort of more clued in on just creativity and feeling than the other two. But I think they're I think they both make sense, right? Like, I think that if I'm a student, I'm like, yeah, AI's the language from media is literally just painting a picture that all is lost. Like, you're not going to get a new job, and it's going to, and if you're reading the headlines, you're seeing Meta's laying off people, and all these, there's tech layoffs, and we've written about that. And they're not explaining what's not happening in that is they're not explaining that, a lot of these tech CEOs are understanding how AI is going to shift the marketplace and the businesses, and they're making these big changes to kind of position themselves for the next 20 years. And they're just saying your job's lost. So I think both. I think the two camps that we talked about, job destruction or job creation, are both going to happen at the same time. And I would say that not a lot of us are going to know exactly what new jobs are going to be created. We could talk about some of them coming, but
forward deployed engineer.
Yeah,
right?
Forward deployed.
That's the hot button, one. But
yeah.
Look, I think every time you have creative destruction, you don't quite know what's on the other side of it, and it doesn't. It never is clear, and it's never clean. The transitions, it's always messy whenever you have these things. Think back to the the internet days. I mean, are there still radio DJs? Sure, there are. They get paid less. It's not a growth industry, but they're still there talking, and so it will it'll continue to work. And but you had all sorts of people, rise up and build Spotify, build, Pandora, build Sirius XM, build, all these companies that ate that industry, which I, knew so much about and was intimately involved with for years. So are there more people now in the music business and the music distribution business than there was before? Probably not. Are
It's
there?
just totally different.
Yeah,
That's the thing. It's like
but that's
almost
it.
I was in the music business as well, and like,
yeah,
I started off calling radio stations to get, my college band added to the radio thing. You just don't do that anymore. So, but you do it differently by working TikTok or social media. So I think the general way businesses are going to work that have worked 25 years ago, that are working now and in 25 years, it will be remarkably similar. And I think the deck chairs are going to change. So I'm kind of like, I'm essentially saying that there's going to be job destruction, there's going to be job growth, but it will be the way your colleagues work today in a corporation are going to work totally different, which kind of I think segues us to sort of like where we were talking about how AI is going to give the general corporation a new level of competence. Like it's just like you're you know if you're a smart company, you've already made the decision to sort of adopt AI in some profoundly and some very sort of lightweight. But the profound ones are going to see themselves running on a AI competency layer that's going to become sort of almost like the corporate governance of the company. And as you hire people in, the expectation will be they're already using our sort of AI business harness that we always talk about, and that's going to make them way more competent and way more effective day one. In the engineering space, onboarding new engineers was always sort of like art and science. Some of us got it right, some of us didn't, depending on who you hired. But there's, if you're running on a 10-year-old code base, you need to get someone working within sort of, 2 weeks and expect them to be sort of like committing code in, 6 weeks. That's always hard for a new person to do it, and teams bring people in. I think now the onboarding of an engineer in an organization using AI has significantly changed. I think that works now for a knowledge worker. It's like, hey, here's how we run. Here's how we run our systems. Go. They should be able to pretty much move fast. But that's a very elite corporation. So, we're going to see this change rapidly over the next 5 years on how the corporations adopt an AI strategy.
Yeah, I would agree. I know we agree on this. It's again, I don't think that anyone really knows what an AI first company looks like, what an AI enabled company looks like, what an AI optimized company looks like. Take your pick of the buzzword that you want to use or the corporate governance ideas that you want to use. But I think it's safe to say that and you wrote it in one of these notes here, and I'll just read it. Firms got fat because the way to grow your career was to hire more people. Within a traditional corporation, the more people reporting to you, the more power you had, and that was the way. Like the Mandalorian, I did see the Mandalorian this weekend. It was good fun. That was the way, and maybe the way now is the more agents that report to you, the more power that you'll have, because you'll have more of the outputs, the key outputs of the corporation in, under your control, or that you're sort of monitoring. And that will be the test of who's really the person who, has the real power within a corporation. I did read the, Cloudflare's Wall Street Journal, article, op-ed, and, he called the whole class of people measurers. Just,
yeah, it's pretty gnarly.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And on one hand, it's harsh, but I don't think I sort of hate to say it, but AI doesn't exactly have a human soul to it. Despite what the Pope may be trying to do here. It is harsh, right? It's as we've talked about it, capitalism is all about efficiency and optimizing things, and if you're a measurer as opposed to a doer, you're going to get optimized out ultimately. And that's just an unfortunate truth.
Yeah, I think that if you're I think that's where, corporations are not, social fabric builders per se, right? They are machines to make a widget and sell it and have a high profit. And I think AI is going to accelerate the smarter companies to do that. And so what I had written was, the fellow that made the tweet or wrote a piece on it, I think his name's Deep Whitman on X. He wrote a thing called The Revenge of the Measurers, because I think it pissed a lot of people off. And I feel, and even like, I think the All In podcast guys equally laid into the CEO of Cloudflare for describing his former staff as just measurers. But getting back to the point is that corporations want efficiency because they want to drive profit. And so I think you've written in your past articles where, if you focus on an incentive, that's what you're going to get. Like, so if people are,
of course, yeah,
gain power by hiring, now you could see an organization sort of eliminate hiring and try to get everything to run in a automated framework. So, people are going to be incentivized to not replace the people that are making the things. They're going to try to eliminate the people that are coordinating things. And the way that's going to be done is going to be, you're going to be a very smart individual that knows how to orchestrate AI agents at your company. And that's going to give you the alpha and give you the sort of the value inside the company. And so the measurers go away, but maybe the orchestrators arise. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what's happening here with us. It's like, we're not managing a newsroom. We're managing a way for us to manage agents to kind of do a bunch of work for us. And we're analyzing that work and determining what's of value. So if you just expand that to a $100 million a year company or a $10 billion a year company, it still holds water. You're still going to need coordination, and we might call that orchestration. And orchestration may be like you managing more and more sort of compute intensive systems. But I think that's the way we're heading. And when you look at it, you're saying, okay, well, companies are starting to buy more AI systems. If you're buying more AI systems, you need more people to run those and manage those. So that's the way the talent is going to go. And the outcome of that is going to be measured in probably 3 to 6 years to see if it's effective. Yeah. And you'll hire around that. New jobs will arise around that behavior. But the incentive right now is to do that.
Yeah, what's interesting is the people that you hire or the skill set that you're hiring for may be fundamentally different than your traditional manager, because in all honesty, having managed people, and I'm sure you've managed people, the management of people is the management of, I'll just call it human emotion and human foibles. You're trying to get specific tasks done, but you have to do it in a way where you don't piss the person off. You don't anger them. You make them feel special. You make them feel like they're important to the job. And when you're managing agents, you're just telling them, I need this done. I need this done. I need this done. This. And you have to get rid of the more humanity you put into it, probably the worse the answer is, simply because you're burning more tokens by saying thanks and please and making parenthetical statements like I'm known to do, or, around things that are just unnecessary. It just gets in the way of the actual context that you're trying to drive at. So, as corporations, adopt sort of an AI strategy, which I still think the majority of them haven't at all. So I'd say the majority of corporations haven't. The top ones are starting to, but and obviously the Metas and the Cloudflares, they have already, and they've already started. And the reason why you're seeing the layoffs, in my opinion, is they've already got the internal consensus from the top leaders that this is the way. And now they're saying, okay, whack 10%. You know what I mean? Because they've already made that decision. The rest of corporate America, big and small, haven't figured this out. And I think that they'll start to sort of orient themselves into staffing people that can spend time talking with agents and organizing them and coordinating them and orchestrating them.
and you'll have a new worker. And the manager that you're talking about that dealt with both like human ambition and emotion versus just dealing with agents, that manager will shift, and that will be a new talent to sort of develop. And I think that's where maybe there's alpha for some people. Some of the questions I think that we might want to think about trying to like debate here is like, does giving corporations like a new set of, AI brain to it, does it favor the incumbents, or do startups sort of win at this? Like, I think I have my answer already, but, who does it threaten, incumbents or startups?
Yeah.
As corporations get smarter.
I think the answers could be twofold, and because I've thought about this question actually a lot, and I always come down to two answers. The small and nimble guy always has an advantage when things change, right? Because it's easy to sort of row a kayak in a new direction, whereas the battleship takes a while to turn, right? So small and nimble is generally good, but small and nimble is still small, and all of these companies have to deal with the reality of that all of this is going to cost money. I mean, all of it is going to take resources. So if you say that every AI startup is going to get funded with, a $50 million, Series A, forget about valuation. Let's just, talk that someone hands them $50 million, then, yeah, you can be small and well-funded, and therefore, deal with a lot of the problems that you're going to run into. But in general, all of this stuff takes customers. It takes customer trust. It takes building an organization that is already scaled to some degree. And all of those are really difficult tasks that, if you've ever started a company, which you have, it's difficult to do. And we're in a world where the skill set that it takes to do that is probably different than it was 2 years ago. Forget about 2 decades ago.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that I wouldn't take the incumbents with, lots of money on the balance sheet, with more levers to pull to generate more shots on goal, so to speak, in terms of winning. So I guess the way I'd put it is, if you were going to ask me, who's going to grow faster, the incumbents or the small guys? Well, the small guys will grow faster because they're all off of a smaller base. Who actually will likely win? I think the incumbents win unless they take their eye off the ball. Because they will have, if ultimately you have to disrupt everything, the question is going to be who gets more shots on goal, who gets more opportunity to get it right before they disappear. And I think the incumbent guys just get more shots on goal because they have this inertia behind them. And like you said, most of these companies are not necessarily AI pilled yet. So they're still, and look, is anyone going to, I don't know, disrupt Pepsi using AI? Well, I think no.
I think that when you look at like a company like Robinhood, that's sort of given a different segment of the market the ability to trade stocks, and I have to believe that Robinhood is more AI pilled than, say, Charles Schwab or Vanguard, for example. And maybe someone thinks Robinhood's an incumbent and maybe not a startup. So that
Right.
I could be comparing the wrong things, but I guess my point is that could a new audience that adopts a startup just never adopt into an incumbent's ecosystem?
I mean, just create a new market effectively.
Well, no, you take a market that's like stagnant, like banking, and you just go like, hey, like, look, we're this, and we're gonna provide you tools and services this way, which is so modern and intuitive for this audience, and the incumbents just can't shift because it's the Clayton Christensen problem. They just can't change because their current buyers are just not going to let them change. And therefore, that adoption curve just never allows that new audience to shift back to the old products. I think that's where I see the challenge with startups and incumbents.
Yeah, I mean, look, you mentioned banking. We use Mercury online,
Yeah, which is
like a lot of startups, and I can tell you that it sucks just as badly as every other banking product out there. Because fundamentally, I think the issue is that all of these sort of old line products that you think kind of, as a consumer, you're like, this could be so much easier. This sucks. And the answer is that they are a function of the regulations and bureaucracies that they have to operate under. So in order to take somebody's name off an account, even though, it's easy for us to say, okay, we've bought out a partner, let's take his name off the account, the amount of paperwork, that's necessary for me to do that, and the amount of things and boxes to check and know your customer forms and this, that, and the other thing that I have to do, I'm like, why do I have an account with you? I could do this at JP Morgan or Bank of America. I could just walk down to the branch. Well, who do I talk to at Mercury? Sorry, there's no one to talk to at Mercury. There's no one
so
to
that's
help you.
interesting. Yeah.
And there's customer service, of course. It resides offshore. It answers you in 2 days via email. You can't get anything done. And at the end of the day, they offer you an extra, 0.2% on your money. And it's like, okay, instead of getting 0, you get 0.2, and who gives a shit? Like, it just doesn't matter. So I do think as long as there is sort of regulatory issues in any industry or bureaucratic issues in any industry, it favors the incumbents dramatically for that very reason, just because they actually have all that stuff set up, and and the new guy has to come along and actually, deal with all of that. And that's just, it's really hard. And, look, is Mercury's website good? Sure. It's great. Can I move money easily? Sure. But, do I use both JP Morgan and B of A in my personal life and Merrill Lynch, just as easy as I do Fidelity or Robinhood or anyone else? Yeah, absolutely. All of them.
I guess the last big incumbent win or loss, I feel like, is the Uber, how Uber just attacked the incumbents so aggressively. So, and obviously Uber spent a lot of time developing a set of algorithms. One could call it AI, but it would not be considered the LLM AI that we talk about today. That sort of challenged the incumbents, and I think may have actually won. I don't think the product is demonstrably better. It just shifted it so much that I don't think anyone would realize that grabbing a cab in New York was like a very much a human body movement system that you'd wave at them, and now you just sort of stand there and wait for a car to come.
But I think if you think back on it, like Uber won in San Francisco initially, and they won in San Francisco because, raising your hand and waving down a random San Francisco cab was a pretty terrible experience for the most part. Just, all the time. I mean, guess
cabs in San Francisco sucked completely.
Right. And I think Travis and his partners, figured that out and were able to do it. In New York, if you remember, it took a long time to beat down the yellow cabs, and it took a shit ton of money, wheelbarrows of money in subsidies to get people to use their system. Because the truth of the matter is that yellow cabs still function perfectly fine in New York City because of the density of the city and the sheer number of cabs. There were just a lot fewer cabs in San Francisco, and it was a less dense city. So I think that had a lot to do with it. And remember, Uber burned, while Uber, is very profitable today, it burned through $65 billion, I think. I think that was the maximum cash burn before they ultimately became, kind of cash flow profitable and started to chip away at that. And so, like, the net cash that Uber has generated in the history of that corporation is still quite negative.
Yeah.
And, and for all like Waymo could come along and say, all right, we got a better mousetrap all of a sudden. Or, the
which
Tesla
is normal.
Full driving. Right. But I guess my point is that if you throw enough money at something and subsidizing something, you will absolutely get share. The question is, who gets the benefit ultimately? The incumbents obviously get crushed because they have to start offering services below the price, below profitability in order to survive. but it doesn't mean that the guy, giving away the business will survive. I mean, Uber,
I mean, the
has
video that
gotten
we
there.
yeah, the video that we put up a couple like, I don't know, a week ago of Ken Griffin he talked about this a little bit, and I think it got like I don't know, a lot of views for us. But I think he was talking about, as companies adopt AI, and as others adopt AI, your corporate moat is challenged because a lot of people's moats are like, hey, we know how to do these things and you don't. But as the competency lifts, your moat is actually challenged. And I think that was his point of view. Obviously, he's basically saying, hey, like, you have to be more innovative to survive. I think Andreessen's just saying, says, well, I mean, I guess as competency inside the corporation grows as a result of a company that fully adopts an AI strategy, and that doesn't mean reducing your staffing. It says you're going to actually use this technology in profound ways. I think what I see is that the you're going to get greater output with the same amount of people, or you can actually reduce people. And we listened to the Lenny's podcast, and they had on Dan Shipper, who runs Every, and I think he's a pretty interesting guy. His point is just like, hey, like, if you have a PM that can actually basically manage fewer engineers, a product manager managing fewer engineers, and let the AI execute, that project manager's loop between ideation, discovery, scoping, and development is if that timeline collapses, they'll be able to ship a lot faster. And so I think that the way I look at it is companies that adopt this AI strategy, they're going to basically be able to reduce some sort of time to market. Ken Griffin's saying your moat might get challenged. Innovation is really important. So whether it's a startup threatening you, or you're an incumbent and you need to kind of change the way you're gonna have to change the way you make stuff.
Yeah.
Because the market's changing.
But it's all, look, again, it also depends on what kind of business you're in. Dan Shipper runs a online software company, effectively. Puts out a couple pieces of software. Does his podcasts, and writes a bunch. Has a bunch of people writing. It's good stuff all around. But fundamentally, everything he does is a digital product. So, yeah, of course, you're going to be able to do more with less, or hire people to expand quicker. Energy can't get any bigger any faster, right? Like it may be able to reduce its headcount, but it doesn't, the adoption of AI doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be able to double its power output in short order, versus, Exelon versus, the next, power guy. So I think it really depends on, who you are. Again, Coca-Cola, can it put out more cans of soda with AI? Yeah, it can probably engineer itself and marginally improve. But is it going to gain 12% share at Walmart because it fired a bunch of people, or because it has a smarter output? I somehow doubt it. So I think you really have to take a look at what business you're actually in, and then adopt AI. You need sort of the right tool for the right job, and hopefully you're creative enough to create new jobs for your company that grow your top line.
That CEO puts a mandate in saying, hey, we need to use AI, and we're going to start actually analyzing your comp package based on how much AI you're using and how much you're reducing headcount as a result of like following the other CEOs, because a lot of CEOs just follow other CEOs. You're going to get just bad outcomes. And what's going to happen is market in general is going to suffer because people just made really bad decisions thinking that they could just add AI and maybe cut jobs and be like, hey, I satisfied an OKR, but it really didn't really change anything. It was just an OKR thing.
It's
I think
garbage in, garbage out. So yeah, look again, the barrier.
But that's happening.
Right,
I think
of course,
that's happening.
It's happening all over the place. But the barrier to creating software companies has gone to close to zero. Right? I mean, it's if you have you don't even need an idea, as that guy from Cled showed us last week that we talked about. I don't even need an idea. I just need to see someone else's idea, and I need enough tokens to have AI go and copy the idea, and then I'm in the same business. Hey, I got a whole portfolio of interesting businesses.
Well, I think that's kind of going back to that. I think we're asking the question about incumbents for startups, I actually think if incumbents really wanted to play the game aggressively, it would be to literally fund the startups that are destructive to their main business. Because because in a startup you have no legacy. It's just all new, but it's like you might discover something really profound by funding that versus letting a startup that you have no interest in attack your business. So it's like, because you want the shots on goal, you want that ingenuity, you want that innovation, but you're not going to probably get that from your incumbent team because they're managing a book of business.
Right.
But the startup is going to be like, I don't give a shit about your book of business. I'm just going to go after it. So I think that the incumbents could win by funding creative destruction, and whether they're going to do that or not, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, or you could do it. You could just do it internally. Forget about funding it externally.
I think it's hard. It's hard.
Just it is. But
getting hundreds and hundreds of people to do stuff creatively.
No, I would say
the drag coefficient.
Don't do it. Don't do it internally. Fund a parallel corporation that basically looks at the market and says, hey, I'm in the personal data sales business. This guy at CLED is doing a pretty good job, and we see him as competitive. So therefore, we're going to put $2 million into a CLED clone. We're going to clone it tomorrow. We're going to call it, Claude. And
you can't call it Claude.
And we're going to, KLOD. And and we're going to hire a few people to manage the thing, and we just own 100% of it, and that's it. And then it just becomes like the your typical tests where you have your survivor tests, right? You do a test, A versus B, the survivor moves on, and you just keep doing that until you kill off the guys who are who are coming for you. And once you've killed them off, you've probably figured out whether or not someone else could kill you off. And if you have, then you own it, or you've figured out that you have a pretty good moat, in which case you can sort of wind it down, or just fold the findings in. It takes a different mentality than your typical manager to do that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that the pressure on business right now is I think you just nailed it, is like you need a different kind of manager. You're going to need a thinker and an operator that's going to act completely different, which kind of brings me to this other place where it's like, okay, AI's, your company gives you an unlimited budget to sort of, let's get AI in here, let's change the business, let's figure it out. Let's just say we give that let's just say that's the assumption. Are we looking at folks that have decades of domain expertise versus people that are sort of have no domain expertise? Given the fact that you're using AI, your boss comes in and you says, hey, Harry, you have a $200,000 a month budget to make what you're doing in your organization run on AI. That's where you're going to go. Are you hiring a bunch of college grads that have no understanding of my business? Or are you finding your top team and saying, guys, we need to think different. We got the mandate to do it. Who wins here?
Yeah.
Domain experts, or
I'll give you the
people that have no idea about the business. I know I'm framing that question in a way.
No, I think it's I'd say this.
Does experience matter here?
Yeah. Well, look, so experience, I'm just going to put it this way. If you're thinking about AI, does context matter, right? Like if you're using an AI system, probably the most important thing in terms of getting a good output is to give it the proper context. If you give it no context or shitty context, it gives you a poor answer. If you give it great context, then it generally gives you a much better answer. So the person with experience, who's got a little, maybe, gray in their beard like this, like you, like me, has lived and seen more. So we probably have more context. Now, I would then question, is it the right context? Is it the right context for today or not? Or is it just that you're just old? You've just seen a lot of stuff, so you have history, but you can't necessarily put it into the terms that are necessary for these systems to work today. So if I had to lean one way or the other, I would lean toward the people with more context. Now, you then have to operate the harness, right? You have to operate the system. I can give someone context, But how that gets built into actionable items that work today, I don't know, right? You sit there, use Claude Code, and you can code in Python, and I can't, right? So, are you a better person to operate the system than I am? 100%. I mean, I'm sitting on the board of Weed Maps, and I can talk to the woman, Sarah, who is the CTO there, and she is a graduate of Caltech. She's obviously an incredibly smart, really talented woman. Do I know more about the cannabis business than she does? Yeah, I think I do. Having done it for many years and solved a lot of the problems that she's trying to solve. Does she have an ability to make all of that knowledge actionable in a way that I don't, with a team of people that knows how to do that? 100%. I can't even begin to compete in terms of engineering talent or
Yeah,
anything. So I think you need the combination. I guess is what I'm saying is you need that combination. And the
yeah,
question is, how do you build the right teams where the people who have the knowledge are able to pass it into the people who have the technical abilities and then say, okay, make it work.
yeah. So my feeling is that obviously I'm biased. I think that people that have domain expertise and awareness are going to sort of operate a little bit more efficiently as a result of sort of saying, I have this AI, it's been trained on what was, I know what was, but now I can actually I can now use this AI tooling to push forward faster. I think it just allows someone who's just older just go, okay, great. I don't have to have 9 engineers anymore under me. I can just kind of get by with 2 or 3 and we can kill it. And the 2 or 3, there's just less communication. There's less everything. So we're just going to move inherently faster. So I think that the generational split here is going to be favoring people that have domain expertise.
Yeah, but by the way, I do too. But again, I try to check my biases there. I think you can. I guess here's the thing: if you take a look at what's in shorter supply over time, the ability for people to use a tool that makes it easier and easier to use, which is I'd say the AI systems. Again, I'm now deploying Python code.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's not something I could do a year ago, right? So that's become easier. My knowledge of, let's say, the cannabis space, for that example, or my knowledge of the music space, hard won over the years of investing and being involved in that, it's not getting any easier to get that experience. It's actually getting much harder to get that experience. And I think because corporations will start to hire fewer people and do more with less, there'll be fewer opportunities to get that sort of hands-on experience at any level in these organizations for a while, which is going to leave this gap, which I think is going to make experience more relevant. And I think, quite frankly, that it's not just individual domain expertise. It is domain expertise that you can link to other domain expertises and link to, for lack of a better word, style and judgment and taste that really makes people valuable in this world. And it is very hard at age 19 to have style, judgment, and taste because you just haven't seen enough to do it. And it doesn't mean that there aren't people who are extraordinary, who are much better than the people who've been around a long time, because that's the world, right? But in general, if you take the average person who's age 40, who's been around doing stuff for 20 years, and take the average person of age 20 who's hasn't done anything yet, I would say that the 40-year-old is probably going to be a lot more valuable.
If they're can make this, if they can shift.
Yes.
I think that's where organizations are going. I think I would if someone was like, I'm totally gung ho and I love all this AI. Look what I've done. Here's things that I've done right or wrong using all this stuff, and they're fully sort of pilled. I'd rather have those folks on my AI, my team at a corporation than people that are like scoffing and they don't like it. I think that's a, you really want the energy focused on the future, and so I think that's the way to go. I mean, I'm looking at sports team.
If you're scoffing and you don't like it, and you're thinking, well, this is a passing trend and it's going to go away, then if I'm the manager, I just, I have to find a way to work you out of this team, right?
I think so. I think 100%. But that happens all the time, right? There's just like people don't like change. It's like they might have just got stuff figured out and suddenly it's like everything's changing. And I have to do this or I have to do that. It's just.
Yeah, someone once described a CEO this way. He said to me, in order to get him to make a decision, you have to put the gun to his head and then you have to pull the trigger 3 times. And then he finally, like moves off the dime. And, and that guy effectively went bankrupt, right? Because he couldn't make the changes necessary. He didn't want to change. He was stuck on things and doing things in a certain way that ultimately led to his demise. And I think you just have to be incredibly flexible these days because the tools are changing so fast. The opportunities are changing so fast that for most people, again, you can probably live your life out. Again, I wrote a piece last week about going to a loan closing and, I mean, it was like walking into a mortuary. And
Emmett, that was the piece it was called. What was the title of it?
Emmett's Roof.
Yeah.
And but the point is, like, the title closer was old enough that he's going to make it to retirement. But the 22-year-old who's got a job as a title closer is going to see their job either change or is going to go away. I mean, there's no reason for that human being to be sitting there for 6 hours. None whatsoever. There's no reason for me to be sitting there for 6 hours as the I think the borrower, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's you're dealing with the old world meets new world, and I think we're decidedly talking about this new world, and we're talking about it as if it's going to happen. But the AI getting injected into companies with profound harnesses that are like been like battle tested. I think we're going to go through multiple iterations. I think we're going to have a lot of like punches in the face, if you will, and they'll have to retool. Organizations will have to figure it out. I think the younger organizations are going to adopt this and be like very resilient and know how to operate it. And they're just literally going to have like a single mindset at the company. These startups are all going to be focused on it. But the older organizations are going to have probably many shots on goals. And you're going to see the media. And I think this is where the media does such a disservice to the community of business people, is they're going to write stories about, hey, these companies have tried AI and 9 out of 10 projects fail or never ship.
Right.
But they don't go into the details. It's like the 9 projects that didn't ship yielded tremendous insights to the one that will ship. It's this terrible journalism. And I just think it's such a disservice because they don't understand how teams work and software works, that like, yeah, you get a lot of things wrong, but that doesn't mean that it's bad. It means that you're learning what is right.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm going to kind of just sort of, I want you to comment on this, but I see this in sports teams more and more. Maybe you're a hockey fan. I'm watching baseball. I'm watching basketball and football. And I've noticed that teams that are doing really, really quite well is that there's a bunch of older guys still on the team. It's not a bunch of like just brand new people to the football squad, or, there's just, it's a mix. And I think companies have got to start really thinking about how front office works in a sports team, where they have like some veterans that can like maintain the insanity of gameplay with some younger people and sort of like balance it out, because you want that sort of veteran knowledge on the court. Like, hey, let's settle down, do this, back it up, roll. You see that on basketball and football. I'm sure you see it in hockey. You could talk to that.
100%.
But it's really, you really want to see corporations understand that deeply so that you can mix in some new talent, some middle of the road career talent, and some senior talent, and say, hey, you're going to all operate differently, but you're going to get these systems built for our company, and you pay them really, really well, and you adopt those kind of that blend. So you have veteran talent and fresh off the boat talent that have skills, and really, I think that's where you're going to. I don't hear executives talk like that, talk like sports teams, but if you really look at the way a team is built at a world-class organization in the NFL or NHL or NBA, they're thinking about this deeply.
Yeah, I think it's, you want to bring in people who are leaders, who have been proven winners, because at the end of the day, everyone has to operate in the timeline, that they're given, right? We age and we work in, our prime years or whatever decades they happen to be. And so it doesn't mean that the skills that allowed you to win in that period of time all of a sudden become completely irrelevant. They're still there. And so you see it a lot, and obviously in, like you say, in sports teams, where you want to bring the right energy, the right work ethic, the right sort of leadership skills, the right commitment levels, the right respect for the managers, respect for your other teammates, et cetera. And what you're really talking about is on a sports team level, but I'll bring it back to business, is you're talking about effectively building up an apprenticeship system within the organization where I'll go to the Mandalorian. At first the old take care of the young, and then ultimately the young take care of the old. That was a line, straight from the movie. And that's real, and that's really what you're talking about. So, again, if Sarah doesn't know a lot about cannabis at Weedmaps, and there are people in that organization that do, you need both of those people, and you need to teach Sarah as much about the industry and the history and the knowledge of that business in order for her to be an effective CTO. And at the same time, she has to show what can be done with technology to the guy who knows everything about cannabis and doesn't know how to turn on his computer. Because all of a sudden that guy's going to have an aha moment and say, well, wait a second, if you can do that, then this has been a problem in the industry for years, and can you solve that? And of course, the CTO would never know that that problem even exists, because they're not out talking to guys who, operate in that business every day.
Yeah.
And I think, that's the model that you ultimately need, is to actually pair these people up that have sort of, disparate skills, playing the same game, playing for the same team, but one who can provide knowledge and leadership, the other one who can provide, let's say, energy and some appreciation of new technology. And then everyone gets smarter. And that's how you ultimately build up
That's
the
how you win.
corporation.
That's
Yeah.
how you win, yeah.
So if you decide to use AI today to fire every person under the age of 25 at your corporation because and just never hire anybody, well,
I mean, that's,
you're but you see, like you see it with sports teams too, right? The bench, my New York Rangers are a prime example of this. Have not drafted well, so they never build up new young talent. They leave them in the minor leagues for too long. They don't give them their shot up at the NHL, and then ultimately you have this win now mentality. So you go out and you buy players who are proven winners, to try to win today. But and it's great if you do, but it doesn't always happen. It usually doesn't happen, because there's something to a team that makes them gel. And if they don't win, then you end up with a rebuild, a retool. In the Rangers case, the letter, of 2017, and then the second letter, where the the GM of the team and the president of the team writes its fans and says, "Don't despair. We are going to rebuild, and we're going to sell off all your favorite players, and we're going to get new players." And you sort of say, "Well, you didn't quite get it done with the older guys, so what makes me want to trust you with the new guys?" And I think on a corporate level, the same thing happens all the time. All the time. And if you don't continually reinvest in your people, your systems, your talent, you're going to fall by the wayside. And the smart guys are going to be the guys that figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I like using sports teams as an analogy, because I think they work for me. So for the people that are listening, if they don't like sports, sorry about that. But I think it's about balancing your team. I feel like, we're coming up to the hour here, so I think like the couple things that kind of close in on here is like I feel like we wouldn't be doing a good podcast if we don't really kind of give some advice, maybe, or some high level thinking for people to think about. So I think that for people that are curious about AI and they're afraid of it and they hate it, I think it's time for you to just start using it. For the CEO that is using it and feel like that, or their company's using it and they don't know how to use it well, I think you have to double down. Like if you're not getting the traction you want, it doesn't mean stop. It's not working. It means you're not working it right. It's probably your team and talent needs to get adjusted. AI is not gonna like, it's not, there's no AI job apocalypse. It means that the stuff is shifting, and that means the middle management is probably gonna suffer the most. If you're actually a maker or you're the seller of the product, you're probably in a good spot. But if you're in the middle, and I think that the fellow that calls on the measures, which is I think is quite rude, is making a point, is that middle space is going to be challenged because organizations are going to shift to try to automate. So I think the thing to do is self-teach, self-learn, because corporations aren't really teaching you how to do it. I think it's really important that you ride the models. You know what I mean? That you really try to understand what's working and why it's working, and be a resource to your company. And doing this, be selfish, because as you're doing it for your corporation, you're doing it for yourself, and you're going to be a lot more valuable by understanding how a model is working. But go deeper than chatting with it. Try to orchestrate a workflow that will provide you an output on some sort of task that you do every day. And then as you learn how to do that, you're going to start seeing how that's going to become a symphony of agents running and working. And if you can manage that, you're going to be super valuable to your company. I'm going to pause there, Harry. You probably have some of your own closing ideas and thoughts.
Yeah, as you're talking, I keep thinking about that the famous quote. The future's here; it's just not evenly distributed. I think it was William Gibson who wrote that. Yeah, I mean, look, if you do nothing but read the paper and read the trades, you will think to yourself, there's just a bunch of really smart people out there in San Fran that are killing it. They're all billionaires. They're all outbidding each other for real estate that you'll never achieve. And that's that. And there's no way to get there. And the answer is that probably shouldn't be your goal unless you happen to be in San Francisco doing that. For the average person, for the average worker, for the average citizen, student, et cetera, you're probably not going to be in the frontier model game. Some of you will, but the vast majority won't. So the question is, how do you educate yourself? How do you make yourself smart on these things? You don't need to be on the bleeding edge, but you need to make yourself useful. Learn how to use the tools to make your life better, to make your job easier, to make your output stronger, more frequent, and to sort of make a difference in your life, whether that's a work life or personal life. Because at the end of the day, you've seen this now time and time again. Anthony, referred to it earlier as, it's sort of testing. It's sort of paying tuition bills, for lack of a better word. For every failed experiment isn't just money down the drain and a failure. It's a feedback loop.
Yeah,
and you have to iterate and sort of pay that price in order to get to peak performance. I wrote a piece today about the Pope's encyclical, but in there is a sort of a bit about Max Verstappen, who's one of the greatest F1 drivers, probably of all time, certainly of our time. Him and Lewis Hamilton have won most of the F1 drivers championships of late. And what makes him great? Well, he's got a great car, but and you just look and say, well, Red Bull's got a better car, and for years Mercedes had a better car. And yeah, they do have a better car, and they have a great driver. So the question is, why do they have a better car? Is it just their designers and engineers that were better? Yeah, probably. But what made them better? And I think what made them better was a continuous feedback loop where lap after lap, guys like Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton would zip around the track, giving them feedback and telling them, we need to change this. We need to optimize that. We need to make this a little bit better. And they failed continuously, and they crashed cars, and they wrecked transmissions, and they destroyed their wings, and they did all of these things that cost an enormous amount of money. And the only thing that you see at the end is the guy spraying champagne, but you don't see the year-round grind and all of the failures. It's the same thing with Elon Musk and Starship and the Falcon before it. The press sees a spaceship blowing up, and they laugh and they say, NASA wouldn't allow that to happen. Boeing wouldn't allow that to happen. Lockheed Martin wouldn't allow that to happen. But he looked at it and said, every time I blow one of those things up, it's data. It's a price that I need to pay to get there faster. And if I blow it up, I can get there faster. So I plan on blowing it up and plan on spending that money so that I get to the finish line faster. And now you can't go into space without SpaceX. There's no one else because he did it.
On that note, SpaceX has put more satellites up in space, one single company, than all of Europe. So it's like he's won. I mean,
right. But I think that's the model that you need to understand, is that you will, again, you can go back and look at the Roger Federer speech. Roger Federer won 80-something% of his matches and he won 54% of his points, which means that basically on any given point, it's a coin flip as to whether one of the greatest tennis players of all time was going to win the point. And he had to pay his dues and lose a lot of points and try a lot of things in order to get to the point where he was incredibly dominant. And I think it's the same for, probably for, just about every endeavor. So AI is no different. Learning AI is no different. Deploying it's no different. You're going to probably fail more than you're going to succeed, but the successes will way more than pay for the failures. It is a power law game. It is venture capital, just writ large and done incredibly fast. Again, one company in the venture capital portfolio returns the whole fund, and one good experiment in AI at your company will return all of the failures that you endured. And that's the way you need to think. You need to start to think about not your on-base percentage, which is the way that most people manage companies. Don't strike out, don't fail because it looks bad. You have to start looking at your slugging percentage. I don't care if I strike out. Babe Ruth struck out more times than anybody, but he also hit more home runs than anybody until Barry Bonds came along and has one of the greatest slugging percentages. So, do you want Babe Ruth in your team, or do you look and say, he strikes out too much? I think you probably want him. The great investors, in many cases, suffer drawdowns. They lose money. They make mistakes. I'm guessing that the best VCs in the world probably, if you look at the actual winners versus losers, probably have more losers than winners. I bet Sequoia has more losers than winners, just on a sheer numbers basis. They probably invest in 100 companies and 70 of them lose money for them, and they don't care because the 30 winners make them the Babe Ruth of investing, and that's where you want to be. So that's AI for you in a nutshell.
So just in closing, if anyone's still listening at this very long hour, which I think it was pretty fun conversation. I think I think we're trying to point out that the transition's real and it's going to be uneven. I think we also believe that experienced workers with judgment and domain expertise are going to have a genuine advantage. Doesn't mean that they all work, but they may be better AI orchestrators. If you're a younger worker entering the workforce, you may find a harder time, but it's not game over. The media is forcing you into this world that's not actually happening. You're going to be able to get a job, but it's going to be harder, and you should definitely know your AI. You should definitely not hate on the AI. I understandably why you do, but you think different. I think companies that are going to harness an AI to innovate will compound. Period. You'll have a bunch of losing games, but overall your team will become more powerful. And the companies that just cut to follow the big tech CEOs, that sort of manager or CEO is probably a bad CEO anyways, and they'll end up losing to smarter companies. And I think that after listening to the Ken Griffin video that we have up on our YouTube page, I think he's right that the moats are threatened, and the new moat is going to be innovation. And I know that sounds old and trite, but it actually really means that you have to become innovative. You can't say it; you have to become it. And your team, which Harry was just talking about, your team management is going to have to be really top shelf sort of thinking, and that's going to be a mixture of using really talented people that understand AI to orchestrate your systems. And those people are in high demand. We hear it all the time. And, if you want to learn more, reach out to us. We're on social media at getcoai.com. GetCoAI. We have a blog and newsletter called Signal to Noise, and you can find that at GetCoAI. And we'll see you next week. Harry, you got anything?
Yeah. No, that's a great wrap up. I think it's all good. And yeah, just get out there and learn. Just every day, get better.
Peace out.